Hi guys, today we are going to do lesson 12.2, which is going to focus on adding and subtracting polynomials. Now, actually, most of the lesson that we're doing today is stuff we've already done before, because essentially we are going to be simplifying expressions. We're going to be adding one polynomial to the other or subtracting, but essentially what we're doing there is combining like terms, just like we did when we simplified expressions. Now, these are going to be a little bit more complicated because we're going to have longer expressions that we're combining as we look at these polynomials, and we're going to be dealing with more exponents, so they'll be a little bit more complicated, but a lot of the skills will be the same. Let's start with adding. Now, when we add polynomials, we have two choices. We can either add them vertically, meaning line them up one on top of the other, or we can add them horizontally. In this first example, I'm going to show you both ways, and you can decide which way you prefer the most, because honestly, they both work just as well. Okay, so let's start with lining them up vertically. Well, to do that, I'm going to write the first polynomial. I'm going to put a 1 in front of that x squared. Remember, when there's not an exponent there, or when there's not a coefficient there, I'm sorry, you can add a 1, and that's just going to help me when I'm combining like terms. Also, I'm going to go through and make it all addition by changing the subtraction to addition, doing a keep, change. Again, you don't have to do that, but I think it kind of helps you not lose those negative signs. All right, now, I am adding to it this second polynomial. So I'm going to line that up underneath. However, I need to match up the like terms. And we've talked a lot about like terms. They're terms that have identical variable parts. And so we need to line up the identical variable parts. So there is nothing in that second polynomial that has an x to the third power. So I'm not going to put anything under the 5x cubed. The 7x squared is going to line up right underneath the other x squared term. And then I'm going to write this as plus negative 10x plus negative 1. Again, I'm doing a keep, change just so I don't lose those negative signs. So what I hope you see now is I have lined up the like terms in the column right underneath each other. Now I'm ready to add. So there's nothing to combine with the 5x to the third power, so that just stays 5x to the third power. Negative 1x squared plus 7x squared is 6x squared. 6x plus negative 10x is negative 4x, and negative 4 plus negative 1 is negative 5. I want to make sure that my answer is in standard form, because we always give answers in standard form, meaning everything that has been combined has been. Any way that I can simplify it, I have, and that my exponents go in order from greatest to least. The degree of each term goes from greatest to least, which in this case it does. So I know that that's my final answer. Now, I also told you that you could add these polynomials horizontally, meaning you wouldn't necessarily line one on top of the other. To do that, I think the easiest thing is going back and looking at your original. I am still going to keep, change just like I did, so that everything is addition, just so I don't lose those negative signs. And essentially what I'm doing here is looking for pairs of like terms. So there's nothing that has an x to the third power, so I'm just going to leave that 5x to the third power. Then I'm looking and I see that this has an x squared and this has an x squared. So I'm going to combine those two to get 6x squared. Then I'm looking for terms that have just an x, and I see the 6x and the negative 10x, which gives me negative 4x. And finally, I'm looking for my constants, which is a negative 4 and a negative 1, and so that combines to negative 5. And what you notice is we got the exact same answer as we did down below. It makes absolutely no difference which way you do this. You can either line them up vertically if that helps you, or look at it horizontally and pay attention to the like terms. So let's practice a few more of these now. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just add these horizontally. I'm going to change all of the subtraction to addition. But then I'm going to just look for those pairs of like terms. If it helps you to line them up vertically, by all means you should do that. Because if it helps you, that's awesome. But I'm going to look for pairs of like terms here. So the first one I see is 5p squared and 2p squared. When I combine those, I get 7p squared. Then I have 3p and negative 8p. Be careful with those negative signs. That is negative 5p. And finally, I'm going to look at my constants, which is negative 7 and 4, and that gives me negative 3. You could also obviously write your answer as 7p squared minus 5p minus 3. That would be the exact same answer. I want to make sure that it's in standard form, which this is, and so that's my final answer right there. Let's look at number 2 now. All right, so first I'm going to make everything addition so I don't lose those negative signs. All right, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and look for the highest degree first. In other words, which term has the exponent with the highest number? And that is z squared. Now, there's nothing to combine with that z squared, so I'm just going to write 3z squared to first. 3z squared first. By looking for the highest degree first, it's going to help me get it into standard form in less steps. So that's why I'm doing it that way. All right, now let's see. I've got negative 4z and negative 3z. That combines to give me negative 7z. And then I have 7 and negative 8. That is negative 1. I'm going to do a double check that it's in standard form, which it is, so that's my final answer. So as you can see, we are just really here combining like terms. You just got to be careful because there's lots of terms that you are paying attention to. All right, why don't you pause the video right now, try 3 and 4, and when you're ready to check your answers, press play again. All right, go ahead and check your answers with mine. Let's look at number 4 for just a minute. Notice, first of all, that I put ones in front there. You don't have to do that, but you can. Also, this one was a little bit unique because there was really no like terms to combine until you got to the constant. 2 and negative 5 were the only ones that could be combined. But again, on this one, make sure that you're really careful that you put this in standard form. So the w to the third power needs to come first, and then the w squared, and then the w, and then the constant. Your answer would be wrong if it was not written in standard form. So just be real careful on that. All right, now let's move on to subtraction. Now, subtracting polynomials is a little bit trickier because if we look at this first example where it says find the difference of 2x squared minus 9x minus 5 minus 4x squared minus 3x plus 8. We have to be careful. This is not asking us to simply subtract the 4x squared. It is asking us to subtract this entire polynomial. Each piece needs to be subtracted. Okay, let's do this vertically first, and then I'll show you horizontally. So, on the first one, I have 2x squared plus negative 9x, because I'm going to make that addition, plus negative 5. Now, I'm going to line up down below the 4x squared plus the negative 3x plus the 8. Now, again, I'm subtracting these, so the order does matter when you are subtracting. You have to put the first polynomial on top. Okay, here's where this gets tricky. You are subtracting each pair of terms because, again, it is this first polynomial minus the entire second polynomial. Not just the first term, but the entire thing. All right, let me show you. I have 2x squared minus 4x squared. Well, that is negative 2x squared. Then I have negative 9x minus negative 3x. Let me show that to you off to the side to make sure you see what's happening here. You are subtracting the negative 3x. So we've always talked about how you can keep change if you want. Essentially what you're doing here is negative 9x plus 3x, which is negative 6x. Then the next term, you have negative 5 minus 8. Again, if you want to see that to the side, it would look like that because you are subtracting each term. And if you want, you could keep change. So this is really negative 5 plus negative 8, which is negative 13. All right, so that's my final answer. Although right now you might be feeling like, whoa, that's kind of a lot to keep track of with all of those negative signs. Let me show you a little trick that might help you here. Just like when we subtract one term and we can add the opposite, we can do the same when we are subtracting an entire polynomial. In other words, I could make this addition instead of subtraction. However, I need to then change the sign of everything in that second polynomial. So this is a negative, this becomes positive, and this becomes negative. Because again, I am subtracting all of it, not just the first thing. And so for some of you, that might help you. Also, when we start looking at this horizontally, I think that can really help as well. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to, if I can here, well, just trying to erase my markings here. Okay. So, when I look at this horizontally, I'm going to start by doing a keep change. So, I leave the first one alone. I'm going to change the subtraction to addition. But again, I am subtracting that entire polynomial. So, I don't just change the sign of the 4x. I have to change all of the signs in there. It's like a keep, change. You have to change that entire second polynomial because you're subtracting all of it, okay? Now I have an addition problem just like I did before, and so I can take it term by term. So 2x squared plus negative 4x squared is negative 2x squared. Negative 9x plus 3x is negative 6x. And negative 5 plus negative 8 is negative 13. All right, let's practice a few more of these because, again, it is a little complicated with these negative signs. All right, let's take number 1 and we'll look at it horizontally. So I have 6x squared plus 4x plus 7 minus this entire polynomial. Not just minus 5x squared, but minus all of that. Okay, so I've got to be careful here and change everything. So this would be plus, and then I change, and change. All right? Or if you didn't go through and change, you would need to do it in each step. So for example, I could do 6x squared minus 5x squared or 6x squared plus negative 5x squared. It gives me the same thing either way. I get 1x squared or just x squared. When I take the next term, I have 4x and I could take 4x minus x or 4x plus negative x. Either way, it's the same thing. I get 3x. On the last one, I could do 7 minus negative 9 or 7 plus 9. Either way, it's the same thing. Hopefully you're seeing there's more than one way to do it, so really you should do it the way that helps you the best. You just have to be careful with those negative signs. All right? As always, make sure your answer is in standard form. Number 1 is, so we're good to go. Let's try number 2. All right, I am going to go through and change that to plus negative. I can make this plus negative. All right, now I'm subtracting this entire polynomial. So I have 14b squared minus 9b squared or plus negative 9b squared, whichever way you want to think about it. That's positive 5b squared. All right, then my next term, I have negative 12b, and I can either think about this as minus negative 5b or plus positive 5b. Either way, it's negative 7b as your answer. And then last, I just have that 1. Now here's where you really have to be careful. This is not just plus 1 because it is minus 1. In other words, guys, I think for a lot of you, the most helpful thing that you could do would be to right off the bat, keep, change, change. In other words, when I start this problem, I'm going to make this plus, so it's addition, and change the sign of everything in there. Again, you're changing everything in that second polynomial, not just the first term. I think doing that right off the bat is really going to help you prevent mistakes because the last term here is actually plus negative 1 or minus 1. Okay, so you really have to be careful with those negative signs. All right, why don't you pause the video right now and try 3 and 4. All right, go ahead and check your answers with mine. As you look at number 4, notice the 3t to the third power plus negative 3t to the third power was 0t to the third power. So you can either put 0t to the third power or you can just leave that off completely. It is not necessary to be there. So you'll see I wrote it both ways. The other thing, let me remind you of, is if it helps you to line these up vertically and keep, change, change that way, by all means you should do that to help make sure you don't make a mistake. But be very careful with the negative signs, especially when you get to subtraction. But remember, the key here is you're combining like terms, and you're just needing to pay attention to when you subtract, you're subtracting that entire polynomial, not just the first term. All right, have a great day.